no one on Engine 29's crew knew that we were in a Mayday.
Right.
So, I'm sort of hectically trying to get resources in play.
Stay tuned. Coming up in this episode, it's part 2 of my 2-part interview with members of the command staff of the Atascocita Fire Department in Texas, as we talk about a commercial building fire that resulted in a Mayday from a crew that became disoriented to their surroundings and then ran out of air. But first, let's hear from our amazing sponsor, Midwest Fire. At Midwest Fire, they know better efficiency results in less waste, and it adds value to every truck they deliver. That's why they have worked hard to implement lean manufacturing processes throughout their factory. Lean manufacturing means a lower cost to build, with the savings passed on to you. To learn more, visit MidwestFire.com. Hello and welcome to episode 304 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this program is to help to improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SAMatters mission is simple. We want to help you and the members of your team see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from my office in St. Paul, Minnesota. Last week, I was conducting situational awareness training for the management team of the Novelis Corporation on Oswego, New York. And then I did a program for the Lincoln County Fire Chiefs Association near Charlotte, North Carolina. Today's feature segment is sponsored by the Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. The Academy trains and certifies your members on situational awareness skills essential for improving high-risk decision-making outcomes. To learn more about this highly acclaimed program, visit SAMatters.com and click on the Online Academy tab under the Training section at the top of the homepage. All right, let's jump into today's feature segment, part 2 of my 2-part interview with members of the command staff of the Atascocita Fire Department in Texas, talking about a commercial building fire that resulted in a Mayday from a crew that became disoriented to their surroundings and then ran out of air.
So now he's standing at this commercial glass door, which, contrary to popular belief, they're hard to kick out. He doesn't have his axe, and you can actually see his footprints during when we started doing our investigation afterwards. You could see his footprints on the door in the soot and the products of combustion on that door. So he's sitting there trying to kick this door out, and he's not getting it. No one's coming to help him, and his firefighters running low on air.
And he's expending energy and consuming air at a greater rate than he probably would have.
Right.
So,
right.
Although he was pretty fit, so maybe.
Yeah. He was a little guy. Didn't take a lot of air. But now another communication breakdown that happened here that led to us having a problem. The driver on the tower and the driver of engine 19, who was pumping, who was the attack pumper, they both swear that they heard someone say defensive fire.
Okay. No, yeah. Okay. Well, I thought that came with the Mayday, but.
No. That was right before.
Okay.
I'm sorry. You're right. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So Lieutenant Snell is sitting at this door, and he's waiting and waiting and waiting. And he realizes, hey, I'm looking at my guy's air, and we're like critically low. They're not coming. So he knows right where he is, turns around, and as they start walking back to the hose line, the rookie firefighter starts going on intermittent vibra alert. When you breathe in and it stops vibing, and then you stop breathing. And so Lieutenant Snell says, "Oh man, here we are. We're at the part of the fire where he probably had a couple opportunities to call a Mayday before this, but he says, now I'm at the part of the fire where I have to call a Mayday.
I think it's important to interject at this point in time that Jared had admitted to David over the course of their tenure together that he wanted to go his entire career without having to call a Mayday. So in the back of his mind, he's got this mindset that I'm not going to call a Mayday unless I absolutely have to. So, for those of us that have been around for a while, since 1985, 25 years of trying to get firemen to call Maydays. And here's this relatively young new lieutenant in the fire service who still has the mentality that I'm not calling a Mayday unless I absolutely have to.
Maydays are bad.
Brian, do you have anything?
Y'all are past some of the stuff. So like just some of the stuff that I wanted to interject from when I arrived. Just my little bit of disorientation of what the building, where parts of the building were, but the roof report kind of gave us a clue of where the fire was when I pulled up. Just seeing the discoloration on the roof on the outside, and announcing that hey, it's there's fire on this metal roof and it's discolored and the paint's burned away, and it's in the middle of the back of the building. To one, hey, watch out because there's impingement on the roof, but two, we know where it is now. But because I was saying on the Charlie side, because it was on the south side of the building, what I thought was Charlie. If Lieutenant Snell heard it, he knew what I was talking about. Nobody else did, because they all thought I was talking about the far west side of the building. So, and then just getting hand tools and getting companies assigned to my division to get the door forced, and started working on it, but once they arrived, it made quicker work of it. We had to get a gate taken apart, and then we could get to the two doors that access the kitchen and then the main dance floor area, before we could go start forcing those doors. So that was it. I was there. I just want to make sure everybody, I was there. I participated.
So Jared makes his way back to his hose line, the intersection of the two lines. This is where they drop the nozzle.
Yeah, this is where they drop the nozzle.
So he makes it back to where he's back on the platform by the bar where he dropped the nozzle. And he's going to try to make it to, at that point, did he I don't remember, did he accidentally find the restrooms, or was he headed to the restroom?
Right before he calls the Mayday, I'm still worried about getting this heat off of these guys and getting this smoke out of here and trying to get ahead of the ball that's already, too far for me to get in front of. So this whole time I've had this crew standing on deck as my RIT team, and they're holding saws and they're ready to go up on, as soon as I get another crew there to go on deck, they're ready to go up and cut this hole. So I see another pumper pull into the parking lot, and I radio command the chief, and I say, hey, if you can give me engine 26, I can send my crew up and get this hole cut. Says, okay, engine 26, report. And at that point, I saw them get out of the truck and they're walking across this long parking lot to me. And at that point, I made a, calculated risk benefit decision. I see these guys walking over to go on deck. And I'm like, well, I'm going to get these guys up there. It's going to take them a minute to get up there. I want to get this hole cut as fast as possible. So I've got, I'm going to have a minute while they're walking up to the crew where I don't have anyone on deck waiting to go in. Right. So I send them up, and the second.
Well, wait, because it's important for you to put in there the thought process, which is what could possibly happen in that minute.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's part of the story. Is I got a minute and 45 seconds that I got to wait for this crew to get on deck in the Alpha Division. What could possibly happen in that amount of time?
Right. So the second this crew's foot hits the top of the ladder, and they're stepping off onto the roof. Jared's found the hose line. His guy's on intermittent vibe, and he says that now's the time. So Jared calls his Mayday. At the time, we did not have a published policy on how Maydays work. So all of us had been through the blue card class. But as it would turn out, my perception of what was going to happen was going to be that command would immediately acknowledge this Mayday and work the Mayday or pass it off to somebody. Chief's perception was, well, Lieutenant Snell's assigned to Alpha Division, so it's going to be Alpha Division's job to handle this Mayday and pass it off. What results in the video is Lieutenant Snell calling a Mayday and no one acknowledges him. So you hear Mayday, 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 silence. And then Lieutenant Snell just gives his Mayday report to us. As soon as that happened, he said, my firefighter's out of air. We're trying to make and we're lost and disoriented. We're trying to find a means of egress. Immediately, I got on the radio and said, I'm sending the RIT team in. The RIT team's still walking up from across the parking lot. So I turn around and walk over to them, start giving them a briefing. Lieutenant Snell grabbed firefighter Drexler and led him through the building. He had to unclick on the way through the building, but led him through the building. And by how they did not follow the hose line because it was buried under some stuff. So the way they ended up going, he got a little disoriented and ended up at the bathrooms. Well, the bathrooms were what ended up being the Alpha Bravo corner. But Jared didn't know which way they were oriented. He didn't remember if he was facing the front of the building or the side of the building. He pulled them in there, and it was very low smoke, no heat. It was on the opposite side of the building from the fire. So he sort of took firefighter Drexler, who had unplugged at this point. They put his hood over his mask, and he sort of had him down in a corner breathing the fresh air that they could find while he was trying to make noise and shine his flashlight, looking for a RIT team to come in. Another side effect of me deploying our on-deck crew to the roof was even when the RIT team got up there, they weren't ready to go. So they were walking from their truck with their gloves, with their masks hanging from their bottle, with their hand tools. We had a RIT bag already at the front door, but they wanted to check it out. So they opened it, turned the bottle on, etc. And as it turns out, there was some confusion, I guess, in how I gave them their orders. Again, this is a mutual aid company. So we don't have, our policies differ a little bit, but they misunderstood me. They thought I was telling them we had a Mayday and y'all are the RIT team. And what I was saying is we have a Mayday, y'all are the RIT team, and I'm activating. Go on the blue line. How that miscommunication happened, I'm not sure. But if you watch in the video, you see the RIT team getting ready kind of feverishly and then standing and talking to each other about what they're going to do. And it ends up taking them about 3 minutes to deploy through the door. All during that whole time, firefighter Drexler's got no air in his bottle. And that was a really frustrating thing for me. So,
well, this is when the air horns got blown. So
yeah.
So in this process, the engine operator for Engine 19 and the training captain who brought the tower both believed that they heard over the air that we were going defensive. And so they blew their air horns in order to evacuate, in order to adjudicate an immediate evacuation of the building. So Engine 29's crew, who was still inside fighting fire as Lieutenant Snell is working his way around the building, and not in contact with each other, which they were feet from each other, but not in contact with each other. When Lieutenant Snell turned to come away from the door on the north side of the building, which would be the traditional Alpha side in this case, he stepped over Engine 29's hose line to go back to the stairs to get to his hose line, which came down the stairs and went to the east to go out. but he stepped over that line as well and continued south in the building until they came down off of the riser around the bar at the restrooms, which is how he ended up in the restrooms. When the air horns get sounded, Engine 29 evacuates the building. So they come on their hose line around their, making a left-handed search. They reverse their search. They come around on the left-hand, the walls to the left-hand side. Now they work their way to where the hose line goes out the building. They walk outside and they, hey, what's going on? Why are we evacuating the building? Now, I presume that Lieutenant Nugent, who was the lieutenant on that hose line, or on Engine 29, heard the Mayday call, but I can't guarantee that because she's in the middle of a firefight and there's noise around her and there's the fire and, microphones get wet and you can't hear them and all those kinds of things. And I don't know if we ever addressed that.
Yeah, she hadn't heard the Mayday.
Yeah.
So she didn't, no one on Engine 29's crew knew that we were in a Mayday.
Right.
So, I'm sort of hectically trying to get resources in play to go help Lieutenant Snell. One of my resources is moving slower than I'd like, again, due to a misunderstanding, as we, found out during our debrief. But then I hear the 3 horns go off. I go over and tell the driver, we're not going defensive. No one said that. And we're not leaving, we're not leaving Jared in there, Jared and Drexler in there. And he said, oh, I swear I heard it, whatever. I turn around and I see Engine 29's crew walking out and taking their masks off and ready to swap bottles.
And ultimately at this point, so the firefighter who was feeding hose, who was a member of Engine 19's crew, realizes that there's a Mayday. And he stepped into the building first or went to the side of the building?
Yeah, he went to the side of the building to try and open another door because he sort of has a feeling he knows where Engine 19's crew is.
Okay. And so in that, somewhere along the way, Engine 19, from their vantage point, Lieutenant Snell, from his vantage point at the restrooms, sees Engine 29's crew walk out the door. So the RIT team is now starting to work their way into the building, and 29 is on their way out of the building. And in all of that, did the fan take effect at that point?
Right.
So we got the back building, we got the back door opened. The fan took effect. The smoke lifted. Jared sees the crew walk out the door, picks Drexler up by the scruff of his neck, and out they go through the front door. So they ultimately self-extricated. And again, the time span of all of this is 8 to 10 minutes. I mean, it's taken us longer to tell the story than it took for this to actually occur. So, and I think for anybody that hasn't been through that situation, you really don't understand that time compression. You don't get a good feel for that. It's like the person that calls for the fire department and says, it took you 20 minutes to get here, and your response time was 3.5 minutes. So this felt kind of the same way. It didn't play in slow motion. It played in very real-time motion, but it takes longer to tell the story than it does for how long it actually took for it to occur, which I found surprising.
Is the firefighter completely out of air?
Yes,
at this point he's done.
Yeah, he unclicked. He ran out of air about the time they were making their move to the bathroom.
So did he take his face piece off, or where is air?
Yeah, he took his regulator out. Unfortunately, they sort of found their area of refuge. And to their credit, they put out a lot of fire before they ever ended up having to try and get out of the building. So he unclicked his regulator, pulled his sock hood up over the hole, and had his face down in the corner of the entry area into the bathroom. So he's sucking air out of a corner of the building. And Lieutenant Snell, who still actually he hit Viper Alert as he was walking out of the building. So he still had quite a bit of air left. But Lieutenant Snell was standing there trying, keeping him calm in the corner. And 2 firefighter Drexlers, to his credit, he did a very good job of staying calm. He's a fairly new firefighter. He did a very good job of staying calm, remembering, hey, I can do these things in order to make sure I'm getting some relatively fresh air. He did a good job of taking care of that, and Lieutenant Snell was trying to get someone's attention. It's a cement ground, so he was trying to bang stuff on the ground and shine his light while we were finally getting the smoke out of that building so he could see where to get out.
So a few things that we had put in motion earlier on finally started to take effect. And in the same way that this was a cascading series of events that led to this unfortunate situation, the resolution of it was an equally uncoordinated set of circumstances that led to the successful conclusion. It's a situation where we immediately went, whoa, this had the potential to be so much worse. And even before the Mayday happened, when you talk about an 80-pound piece of HVAC equipment falling from the ceiling where this lieutenant would have been standing had he not gone back to pull hose. I mean, there's just some stuff that gets mixed into this that you go, we got really, really lucky that day. Really, really, really lucky. And I don't want to run my fire department based on luck.
Got some really, really valuable lessons out of this for really, really, relatively inexpensive.
Yeah, it was an extremely inexpensive lesson, as David has coined that phrase for us in this regard, but it's a very inexpensive lesson for us to learn as a department. It's changed the way we look at our training regimen. We need to consider large area search protocols. We need to talk about bigger hose lines on initial attack. We need to clean up our radio traffic and our transferring of communications from one place to another. We need to, and we've taken steps to do all of those things. I mean, we have a policy now that specifically dictates who's responsible for the initial minutes, if you will, or seconds, if you will, of a Mayday. The incident commander is absolutely the person who makes contact with the Mayday company.
Let's transition into some of the lessons learned.
Okay.
The crew's out.
Okay.
Well, before we transition to the lessons learned, the crew got out. Was the building? Did anybody else go interior again after that, or then was it a defensive firefight after that?
No, it was. Go ahead.
Brian, why don't you take that, because your guys on your side of the building ended up doing the majority of the work after that.
Yeah, so it ended up going really well, and the blue card training that has kind of proliferated. There were only a few departments in Harris County that were doing it at first, and more folks started, buying in and taking the training. So everybody did what they were supposed to do. At one point, dispatch heard the Mayday and told everybody to switch to a different channel, which you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to, everybody stays on the same channel. Everybody gets quiet and has radio silence. Everybody stayed on the same channel, so they didn't listen to dispatch, but they listened to their training, and everybody got quiet and shut up. So even though we were doing things on the Charlie side, we weren't necessarily reporting them. I was keeping accountability of who was going where. So we got the gate open. I had one crew. We got the door open to the dance hall area, and I had them just go in on the wall, because in my mind, they're still looking for the fire, because I haven't heard them saying, hey, we're hitting fire, we're doing this, we're doing that. They're still looking for it. And because of where I saw the discoloration in the roof, I have an idea kind of where they're moving in the building. So I said, go in this door, but stay inside of the door and make noise and shine your light, because they're looking for a way out, and you could be it. So they went inside the door, and that's what they started doing. Within a couple of seconds, I got another company that showed up, and the engine from Humble, I sent them in the other door, which went into the kitchen, which was even more direct towards where the fire could have been or should have been based on what I saw on the roof.
Brian, do either of those crews have thermal imagers?
Yes.
Okay. So
yeah,
they could have seen the firefighters through using the imagers if they were in the view.
Right.
Well, no, because they weren't where I thought they were going to be. They were already around the back side of the building on the other side, closer to the bathrooms by the time the Mayday was called.
If they were in view, they would have seen him through the imagers versus not being able to see him through the smoke.
Yes. But as it turned out, they wouldn't have needed them, because as soon as the back door opened, the building cleared, and the crew that I sent into the dance hall said, we can see the other door, and we just saw him walk out the door.
Mm.
They saw Engine 29's crew from the opposite side of the building walk out of the entry door. So I said, oh, okay. Sent another crew into the kitchen. They reported similar, hey, the smoke is clearing. We don't see anybody. They're banging on the walls, and I hear them clear the Mayday. Okay. Regroup, everybody back out. When the crew came out of the dance halls, they said, we can see the fire. It's right here. It's just inside the door. Okay. Well, you want us to get a line? Yeah, I do. Because, again, I don't know that anybody put water on fire or even found the fire at this point. So that's what they did. They stretched the line, and they went in that door, and it was good because the first crews were hitting fire, but they couldn't hit all the fire because they ran out of hose. So the crews from my side were able to mop up and get the stuff that they couldn't see or couldn't hit from where they were at. It was kind of angled differently. And so we were able to finish up the rest of it, and everything went well. And we finished up the primary and we finished up the secondary with relative ease, because the things that we had started to set up that fully played out and came to fruition were, we had a vent point. We cleared the building real quick. We had good visibility, low heat, and it was just a lot of mop-up work at that point. So the crews that first went in, they did an incredible amount of work, and put a very good hit on it.
So is the business repaired and reopened?
No, they tore it down.
It was repairable.
Yes.
But they chose to tear it down.
Okay.
There were a lot of other things. That particular building had been there for 40 years. It hadn't been updated over the years. The patronage was loyal, but dwindling. It had just been taken over by a new owner. And I'm guessing so this was a situation where a property management company owned the building, but a franchisee of Coach's Bar and Grill was the occupant. And so I'm guessing that the property company or the property management company decided that they didn't want to rebuild that particular structure. The parking lot was more valuable to them, or whatever comes next would be more valuable to them than that particular establishment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and they're about to widen 1962. So
yeah, there's some other things that are going on geographically around that space that could have caused that to happen as well. But as far as the building itself is concerned, the building could have been repaired. Yeah.
Okay. Lessons learned.
Well, as we've talked about already, we learned that leaving the expected geographical markers in place, i.e. address side is alpha side, go to the left, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, in a clockwise motion. We've already written into policy that we will leave alpha on the alpha side. If we decide to send companies into in a different way for whatever reason, we'll just use that designator. Instead of fighting the fire from the alpha side, we'll have Bravo side or Charlie side or what have you. We updated our 2 in, 2 out policy so that there has to be somebody on deck if there's companies operating inside. Not, again, a minute away walking across the parking lot, but literally standing there ready to go with a good awareness of what's happening on the fire ground. These guys from Engine 26, they did it. They showed up on the fire ground, they set their air brakes, they got out of their truck, and they started walking across the parking lot like you would if you were going to be assigned to be extra personnel. They didn't know that there was a Mayday necessarily unfolding. They didn't know that there was, that they were going to be integral in that process. And they didn't they didn't understand where we were at in the fire at that moment in time. They hadn't had any time to acclimate whatsoever. And that happens sometimes, and it's going to happen sometimes. So they got to be quick on the uptick. But that was about as unfair a situation as you could put somebody in and expect them to perform. And they did as well as they could do. The crew that was on there is one of the most highly regarded crews in the area, because that particular department has been on full-time shift rotations for a while. So that crew's worked together a lot, and people know that crew, and they're well regarded locally. So it wasn't that, it wasn't that we ended up with that crew you talk about in one of your discussions. That wasn't it. But you'd be hard telling watching the video, because they were thrown into the middle of a boiling pot of water and had no idea what, we were trying to tell them as quickly as possible, but they didn't know. Getting crews, we've increased. So we realized after this fire that our box alarm card was light. And we were essentially sending a residential structure fire alarm or complement of equipment and personnel to a commercial fire, 3 engines, a ladder truck, and a chief. So we immediately changed that in our run card system to get 5 engines, 2 ladders, 2 chiefs on the initial response. Because the other thing that we talk about here all the time is we know that our next in companies are 7 to 10 minutes out. So about the time that the initial attack company is getting ready to come out and recycle and get a fresh bottle of air, even the 4th or 5th engine on the first alarm is just going to be making location. So we have to think about that from a staging, planning, forecasting type of approach and build the box cards accordingly. So we went back and we reviewed all the box cards and said, okay, well, we're gonna make this a heavy box at the front end. We'll front end load this thing, and then if we get 2 engines or 3 engines on a 3rd or a 4th or whatever. That was another lesson that we learned that we've already taken action to implement. The changing of channels. At one point in time, it was doctrine and pretty much philosophy that you got everybody off the fireground channel and you left the fireground channel for the Mayday and you worked the Mayday on a separate channel, blah, blah, blah. Some of the studies that have been done around the country, most remarkably, the Phoenix grocery store fire, the Brett Tarver fire, they realized that moving people off of that primary channel creates confusion, especially if there's multiple companies operating the IDLH where they can't manipulate their radio like the people sitting outside. Better to leave them where they're at. Okay, so we had to go back to our dispatch provider and say, hey, we need to change this policy. Your policy says you're going to move everybody off of the fireground channel, and we don't want to do that anymore. And so I sit on the communications advisory board for that particular organization. And in that meeting, we all decided, the 6 fire chiefs that use them as dispatch center, all agreed, yeah, that's not doctrine anymore. That's changed. It was good when we wrote it, but it's not good anymore. So we need to change it. So that's in the process of being changed. Should have been changed already, because it was really just a word processing issue. And then some education and things like that.
Question for you about that change. My first assumption is that the motivation to have companies change channels was to give the crew with the Mayday committed airspace. So that being the assumption, let me pause and have you say that's true or not.
Yes,
okay.
That's true.
All right. So now all the crews stay on the same channel. Is there anything in the policy about radio silence protocol for those who stay on the same channel to give airspace to the Mayday company?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we don't do good news reporting as much as we can refrain from it. We stay away from good news reporting. We want critical issues, right? So if command calls a company for a CAN report, then they answer, even during this process. But command knows not to call for a CAN report in the middle of a Mayday because we've got a thing going on, right? And Blue Card pretty much outlines that for us. So we've essentially, as immersed as we were in Blue Card before, we just dunked our heads under the water and got even more immersed and said, okay, we're going to follow this even more to the letter, and maintain radio silence and only allow for condition changes, companies still operating at the fire. Because again, we want the companies inside to assist in the Mayday as much as possible. And sometimes that's continue fighting the fire so that we're not, don't drop your hose line and go look for these guys. Mm-hmm. Stay where you're at, continue to fight the fire. If the roof collapses on you, we want to know that the roof just collapsed because we've got a building integrity problem. We've now got possibly a second Mayday. We've still got, we want to know those things. And those are urgent traffic that we would take forward. And Brian and David are our Blue Card experts. But Brian, if you can talk to that a little bit, as far as what that looks like and how we change things, that would be great.
Yeah, so we just kind of reinforced some things that we had already talked about. The Mayday is announced. Command acknowledges it. And they're supposed to ask dispatch for emergency traffic. And that gets the alert tone and gets everybody on the fire grounds attention. If they can hear it, but it's supposed to get everybody's attention, and command issues the Mayday proclamation. Engine 19 has declared a Mayday. They're operating in this area. They're doing, whatever that information is. Dispatch repeats it, and they reinforce radio silence until emergency traffic is cleared. Then the airwaves are cleared for pertinent information from companies operating. It's essentially handled. The Mayday is resolved in the division by that division officer as we would any other known rescue. And it's the incident commander's responsibility to plus up and give that division officer the resources that they need. I'm going to give you another chief to help you with accountability. I'm going to give you another chief to help you with safety so that you can concentrate on all the things that need to be concentrated on. You're not overwhelmed. So that wanted to plus up the staffing and add additional resources, because God forbid something like that happens again. We want to make sure that we have enough stuff to manage the problem and not make it worse by, we just took away your defined channel and we took away, another resource. So we give them enough resources to solve the problem. It keeps everybody on the same page. They're all aware of what's going on, and everybody is disciplined enough. Had it not been for the air horn going off, Engine 29 would have stayed in their position and continued to fight fire until they needed to recycle for air. And that would have been transmitted as a priority traffic if the Mayday had already been called at that point. So you keep doing the things that you need to do. You reinforce the firefight, and you reinforce so that you can make the rescue and provide them enough resources. We've also changed where we rescue from the inside out. So the first thing that we need to do is give that firefighter or that crew information or resource or help over the radio, because that's the quickest way we can. How do you solve your own problem? Okay, you can't solve your own problem. You're a firefighter by yourself. We're going to redirect your crew, if they're not actively engaged in fighting fire, to backtrack and meet up with you, because they know where they've been and you should be pretty close to where they've already been. They know the building somewhat at that point. If they can't help you with your problem, or they can't find you, or they're not available, we'll send another crew that's not actively engaged in fighting fire to backtrack and, hey, look for this person. What it does is the on-deck companies, or one of the things that helps us with is the on-deck companies can enter the building with more specific resources after somebody has made contact and assessed the problem. if they're the only company inside and the whole company's jammed up, we're going to send the on-deck crew as a traditional RIT team, and we're going to solve the problem as best we can, and we're just going to let it play out. But rescuing from the inside out, that's their best chance of survival, is their crew or another interior crew extricating that down firefighter or that crew and leading them out. And if they can't solve the problem, then they can give a more specific, hey, this is what's happening and this is what we need. We need cribbing. We need, struts and jacks, whatever. And they can bring the right stuff faster. So that change, and then the implementing of the training to reinforce that with everybody is kind of what we've been focusing on and making sure that everybody's aware of, and then reinforcing it through actual paper policies. Every company officer had been through Blue Card, but we just finally took what Blue Card says, made it our own, made it work for our system, and we reinforced it by putting it on paper.
So, and going back to, or continuing in the thread of lessons learned, I can say 100% that I heard the Mayday and I didn't take action as quickly as I should have, because I was waiting for the Division Alpha, for Battalion Chief Roark, to take action. And he was waiting for me to take action. And when we recognized that, eventually one of us spoke up and talked to him and had conversation about, hey, where are you at? And are you on the hose line and things like that? But it took entirely too long for that to occur. So going back and, writing an actual policy that says this is who's responsible and this is how you hand it off and this is where you're going to go next and this is what's going to happen, A, B, C, D, that recipe for success, hopefully. Hope we never have to use it, but if we do, at least we have a recipe for it at this point. That morning I didn't feel like we were deficient in our policies or processes. About 2 seconds after we were done with the fire, I felt like we were woefully inadequately prepared for what had occurred. And so we set about making changes to fix those things. And that's about it, unless you guys have something else.
Yeah, there were some other training issues that we've addressed. We reinforced some air management stuff. And another really key factor of this was, the chief made what I would consider a very strong strategic decision to not put that pumper in the middle of a very heavy smoke column that was drifting out of the front of this thing and across the street. In doing so, where the pumper ended up being positioned was perfectly all right. But then, our guys, again, being house fire guys, 90% of the time, the front door is really the best option, unless there's a tactical or strategic reason to divert from that. Well, in this case, what really would have been advantageous is if we had just deployed that line around the building to the front side of the building. And so really concentrating on some of those large building tactics that we just don't see. We have to build that into our training regiment and make that something that we address very heavily, because it didn't work this time.
Good. Is there anything that you guys would want to share that you haven't had a chance to share because I didn't ask the right question?
Just to reiterate, if you feel like you're in a bad way, call the Mayday. And I would much rather you call the Mayday and be able to solve your problem real quick and real fast and not have any issues than for you to wait too long and us have to come recover you.
And I think that with all due respect to the crew that was inside, one of the first things we teach firefighters in recruit school is to stay on their hose line. They set their hose line down and walked 15 feet away from it. Now that's a confidence thing. Lieutenant Snell felt confident that he knew where the door was, and he was right. He knew right where the door was. Had he been able to open that door, we wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, because there never would have been a Mayday and it wouldn't have been an issue. He stepped over 2 hose lines to get to the point of refuge. And again, he's not here to speak to that. And so I'm not going to beleaguer the point, but ultimately we talk about rote training, or we talk about, the way that we go back to our training when we get into situations of stress, right? It's one of the main neuroscience things that you talk about in your conversations that we've all seen across the country. We didn't do that this time. We went to something else. We deviated somewhere. We took an off ramp. If they had stayed on the hose line, or, we've all done the scrambled hose drills where you have to keep track of the couplings and you follow the hose around and make sure you're staying in the direction. And, we all know that if we follow it out and we keep our eyes closed, we're going to bang into the pump panel at some point. That didn't happen.
I'd like to believe that if he was not as intimately familiar with that building, he wouldn't have left the hose line. Yeah.
Right. I would too. I concur.
With that layout that allowed him to know with confidence exactly where that door was. And he was exactly right. But I think if he was in a building he was unfamiliar with, that he probably would have either stayed with his line or took his line with him.
Right. Mm-hmm. I agree. And that's what I'm getting at, is that there was some complacency that occurred through confidence. And we have to be leery of that every time we get off the truck, every time we get into the truck. Every mishap that I've had driving a piece of fire apparatus is because I thought I was comfortable in doing what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And then realized after I pulled the door off, or backed into the bollard, or hit the police car, or whatever, I was in a situation that I wasn't fully attuned to or aware of, and it caused a mishap. We have to guard. Firefighters, company officers, command officers have to guard against complacency every minute of every day that we're involved, every minute that we're on duty.
Yeah. And let me make one observation as well. This is, I think, the 3rd podcast that I've done where someone set tools down to put their gloves on and then left the tool behind. So it's happening often enough. And one of them was a thermal imager that would have made a significant difference. Here he picked up the thermal imager, left the axe. But to those firefighters who are making pause to put their gloves on, remember to grab what it was you had in your hands when you set that down to put your gloves on. And it seems so elementary to share that, but now having 3 significant near-miss events with a contributor of the tool left behind, it's worth making a mention of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't know how to. I was thinking that too, and I didn't know how to quite roll it back in. Nicely done, but yeah, it's. I walk out of my office without my cell phone all the time, but I'm never without my cell phone. And it's not till I get in my car and I pull out onto the street in front of the headquarters here that I go, crap, I forgot my cell phone. Now I got to turn around and drive back to the office, and but I don't know if it's I don't know what the sequence of events that's happening is. It's fogginess. It's what have you. But it's absolutely, you gotta. I think we, as firefighters, as officers, as managers, we get caught up in. We run a full service EMS providership here, and 80% of what we do every single day is EMS. We train a lot on the fire suppression activities, but we also have to do swift water because we have some moving water around us. We also have to do standing water. We also have to do brush ops or wildland ops. We have to train on a myriad of soft skills so that we're nice to each other and we don't offend anybody. we do a lot of training that's not fire suppression. And because we're not making fires like we used to, you don't get the OJT that you used to get. And I think a lot of what we see in the, I'm going to say perishing, because I think that's still a word, those perishable skills go away. And so you set something down and you don't think about it when you get up and you walk away, because now we're also going, oh, come on, we got to get in the building. We got to this, we got to that. There is an urgency that's necessary in our response and our deployment. But the 10 or 15 seconds it takes us to get a feel for where we're at and orient or acclimate, if you will, isn't going to make a significant difference in what we're going to mitigate. It just doesn't happen that quickly. I think we make it feel to ourselves like it happens that quickly sometimes, but I don't think that it really does. And I even said at the beginning, hey, all of this stuff was happening very quickly. The engine was pulling in. I was trying to give them directions, change where they were going to park, move them around to another side, do all those things. That all seemed very quick to me. But I don't think that it was as quick as I thought it was going. And I can only speak for me. I don't know how the other guys feel about that, but take a minute, take a breath, get a feel for what you're looking at, understand where you're at. Remember that you don't have your helmet on. I've watched guys get down on their knees, put their face piece on, pull their hood back up over their head, put their gloves on, stand up and walk away, and their helmet's laying on the ground in front of them. They had to step over it to walk away from where they were kneeling, but there it lays. So, and you go, oh, whoa, whoa, hang on. So
yeah, I think I'm sort of in that same vein of, sort of a very personal lesson for me was just slowing down and listening to that voice in my head, because I'm pretty intimately familiar with Lieutenant Snell and the way he did things. Very used to listening to his radio traffic, very used to the cadence of his reports and when he gave them. So maybe I was the only one on the fire ground that was feeling this sense of urgency, but I let, instead of listening to that sense of urgency and saying, hey, we need to stop and assess what's going on here, what I was doing was I was saying, hey, let's throw resources in these different places until we find the magical configuration. And what I ended up doing was I ended up committing resources that I really didn't have or shouldn't have committed before doing that, all because I kind of wasn't listening to the message that really, my brain was trying to yell at me. So personally, that's one thing that I walked away with. And again, I'm glad it was such a cheap lesson for me, because that was my buddy in there. And that's one of the things that we have to worry about when we're working these Maydays is, that's my friend in there. And what am I going to do to mitigate this?
Yeah. You call it a cheap lesson learned now, but it really could have been about the most expensive.
Right.
And,
yeah, exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
As Chief said, there was some luck on your side that contributed to an outcome that is, turned out okay. But, you would have only needed a slightly modified set of circumstances to have this turn out rather tragically.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. And contextually, Lieutenant Snell's death 3 weeks later really brought that in focus for me, because we got the lesson. None of us were responsible for his death. It wasn't a at work deal. It wasn't affiliated with the department at all. And yet, here we all are sitting in this guy's funeral. And I would be lying to you if there wasn't a part of me that said, that this could have been that other thing. I'm going through all of this stuff, and imagine if this had happened a different way and we were standing at his funeral.
Yeah. And the luck part of it is we kind of goofed around or joked that afternoon that, it was a Wednesday, which is a lottery day here in Texas. And none of us bought tickets that day because we used up all of our luck at that fire that morning. So buying a ticket would have been a waste of money. Right. It's a little bit frightening as the leader of an organization to realize how close you came to having the ultimate tragedy occur not just within your organization, but literally on your watch, since I happen to get there first and be in command. So, and I tend not to dwell in that area because I can't. Because if I do, I'll think about what might have happened, and my mental wellness will suffer from that. Yeah. We got through it. We were lucky. It didn't happen. Woo, great. Let's move on. Let's fix the things we know are broke. Let's look for things we didn't know were broke. Let's make sure that we're making this the best fire department that anybody can serve in every single time we go out the door.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for coming on the show, sharing the details of the story and the lessons learned. I give you a lot of credit that you learned from it, changed some things to make your organization better. It's amazing how many times I talk with somebody in a class who will share with me a near miss event, and I will say, what did your department change as a result of that event? And they'll say nothing. That very event could happen again today with the same circumstances, and we've done nothing to learn from it, nothing to change from it. And that's probably the bigger tragedy, is to have something happen to be so close to tragedy and not learn from it or change things. And what you guys did here is, you took this as the alert or the wake-up call to say, we've got some opportunity to be better as a result of this event. And you took that and you became a better organization. And by sharing those lessons here, you're going to help other organizations who haven't had an event like that happen, but could still take some of those lessons and make changes in their organization as a result of what you changed, without having to have the almost tragic event that you had. So thank you guys for coming on and being part of the show and sharing your experience and your lessons. Thank you again to Fire Chief Mike Mulligan, Battalion Chief David Roark, and Battalion Chief Brian Mulligan for sharing your amazing story. Remember that this is part 2 of a 2-part episode, so if you missed last week's show, be sure to swing back and watch it to get the backstory to the powerful lessons that were shared this week. In case you were unaware, this show was launched in 2014 with a purpose: to give a platform to those who've had near-miss events to share their stories. When I'm on the road delivering situational awareness classes, attendees share amazing near-miss stories. Their stories motivated me to launch this podcast, so their lessons learned could be shared with a bigger audience, you. The Situational Awareness Matters show, podcasted as SAMatters Radio, and our companion video program, SAMatters TV on YouTube, along with other videos we have posted there, have enjoyed more than 1 million views, listens, and downloads. And I am so honored to be able to provide this free platform for these incredible lessons to be shared. If you like the show, please do me a solid favor and subscribe. For the audio version of the show, search for SAMatters Radio on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, or iHeartRadio. For the video version of the show, search for SAMatters TV on YouTube. Since 2007, our instructional team and consultants have helped more than 1,300 organizations and have trained more than 86,000 individuals to improve high-risk decision-making, including fire, police, EMS, industry, military, business, medical, utility, transportation, aviation, energy production, biotechnology, and more. If someone you know works in a high-risk, high-consequence, decision-making environment, then we are here to help to improve their safety and to help them accomplish the most important mission of all, and that's to go home from work whole and healthy every day to the ones who love them. I'd like to take a moment to honor some of our recent program and consulting clients: the Novellis Corporation in Oswego, New York, the Lincoln County Fire Chiefs Association in Denver, North Carolina, and the Sandoval County Fire and Rescue Department in Albuquerque, New Mexico. If you're interested in attending a program, here's where we're going to be upcoming. On January 13th, we'll be at the Evans Fire Department in Evans, Colorado. On February 5 at the Miami Valley Fire and Rescue Conference in Dayton, Ohio. On February 7 and 8 at the South Carolina Fire Chiefs Association Conference in Columbia, South Carolina. On February 26 and 27 at the Firehouse World Conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. On March 5 at the Center for Public Safety Excellence Conference in Orlando, Florida. On March 10th at the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute's National Fire Service Staff and Command Program in Annapolis, Maryland. On March 14th at the Eastern Oregon EMS Conference in Pendleton, Oregon. On March 16 and 17 at the Kipsap County Fire Training Officers Association in Washington State. And on March 25 through 27 at the Behavioral Safety Now Conference in Nashville, Tennessee. If you want to see the locations of all of our upcoming events, just head over to our website, SAMatters.com, and click on the red tab labeled Upcoming Events Schedule. This tab is located about halfway down the home page. If you're interested in talking with me about conducting a situational awareness assessment for your organization or hosting a training program, just click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage and I'll give you a call. And remember to check the show notes for how to subscribe to our newsletter, how to follow us on social media, and how to learn the lessons of situational awareness to become better decision makers in high-risk, high-consequence environments. Well, that's it. Episode 304 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Fire Chief Mike Mulligan, Battalion Chief David Roark, and Battalion Chief Brian Mulligan. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Midwest Fire. Thank you to our feature segment sponsor, the Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. Thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SAMatters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit SAMatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.